To proceed, may I invite our guest, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, and session moderator, Mr. Ranjan Mimani, on the dais, please. Thank you, sirs. Distinguished friends, we are thrilled to have today Dr. Anand Ranganathan, a renowned geopolitical current affairs expert who need no introduction. Dr. Ranganathan is known for his razor-sharp insights and his ability to decode complex geopolitical issues with ease. He has been regular contributor to various prestigious publication and news channels. We are fortunate to have him with us today. To moderate the engaging discussion, we have our own man of all seasons, Mr. Ranjan Mimani, leading industrialist, social entrepreneur of this region. His wit, humor, and unique perspective on things make him natural choice to steer this discussion. And he's also a founder member of YI. We are sure that this is going to be an exciting, enlightening discussion filled with sharp insights, with observation and thought-provoking discussions. So let's sit back, relax, get ready to engage in the freewheeling discussion with Dr. Anand Ranganathan and Mr. Ranjan Mimani. Welcome aboard. Before I hand over mic to Mr. Ranjan Mimani, I would like to extend floral welcome to Dr. Anand Ranganathan. For that, I request Mr. Sanjay Pava to do the honors.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The mic is on.
And now my request is to Ms. Preeti Dave to present the floral welcome to Mr. Ranjan Mimani.
This way we get to meet you at least.
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So now, Ranjan sir, floor is all yours. Thank you, Mr. Pava, and thank you, Preeti ma'am.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Am I audible? Okay. It's for you. I commence this evening with an ode to the imitable Dr. Kunal Sharkar. Those who get it will know why. A few months ago, Rashna came over and informed that she's going to start a keynote speaker series. And she wanted the list for the speakers to be invited. My list had just one name, Dr. Anand Ranganathan. The very fact that Dr. Ranganathan is amongst here with us today is a testimony to the perseverance and extent of reach of Rashna, which I'm sure all of us have experienced prior to saying yes to come to this program. And I'm sure all of us are aware how busy Dr. Ranganathan is, juggling between his research lab, daily television appearances, educating the uninitiated on Twitter, writing op-eds for the Swaraj and other magazines, writing fiction, as we just found out, and last but not the least, debunking myths about which Mysore park is the best. So back to my story. I encountered Rashna a few weeks later, and she was looking visibly distressed. So I asked her what the matter was, and she told me that Dr. Ranganathan had consented to come down. So I said, then what's the problem? So she said, I'm looking for a smart, erudite, intelligent moderator for the evening. Since I've been raised to come to the aid of people in distress, I acquiesced to be the host for the evening. I have since been informed that Rachna's search is still on, and as soon as she finds someone erudite, smart, and intelligent, I shall be dispensed with a short notice. So with this statutory warning, I would like to begin the proceedings. Since Dr. Ranganathan is a master of so many trades and wears so many hats, we'll try to do a juggling act and try to cover as many topics in today's session. The format would be simple. It would begin with a freewheeling discussion over a wide variety of topics, followed by an interactive Q&A session and further conversation over cocktails. So before we begin, may we request everyone to settle down, keep your phones on silent, your drinks in the front, and your loved ones next to you, preferably in the same order. So to some of us would know, this is the third time, we're third time lucky. Dr. Ranganathan was to be with us. The first time somewhere, I think, was it December, sir? And then we got a call that he can't make it because he had to rush for his son's college admission. And when the audience found out, sir, we lost half the audience because all the ladies were very distressed to find out that you were married. The next time around, the date was fixed. Dr. Ranganathan landed himself in hospital with a heart attack. And on the day of the talk that was supposed to be, he was recuperating in hospital. I'm so glad, sir. You're hale and hearty now. And we wish you the best of health in days to come, because we need voices like you in India today. This time also, he very nearly did not make it. And believe you me, Rachna had to pull a lot of strings with the honorable judges to let him go, because he's facing contempt, criminal contempt, a case which might land him in jail. So Rachna, thank you for the reach, and we hope that it stays this way, and we would love to have Dr. Ranganathan back with us for more and more, because I'm sure this session won't just cut it. So thank you, sir, for being with us, finally. Before I talk about what you actually do, I wanted to, while doing a bit of research, I came across a lovely article written by a colleague of your mother's. And I understand your father was the HOD of chemistry in IIT Kanpur, and your mother, equally prolific and a proficient scientist, was not allowed as a faculty position because your father was a faculty member, and only after he retired did a career really take off, and what a prolific career it was. Sri Subramanya and Srimati Darshan Subramanyam, Darshan Ranganathan. So could you tell us a bit about your childhood, and how did it feel to be around such great talent?
First of all, thank you so much, the organizers, Rachna, Ranjanji, and everyone out here. It really is absolutely fantastic and humbling experience. And can I just say at the beginning that this person with the double chin is my twin brother. Bears no relation to me. I think his name is Anwar Rahmanathan or someone like that. Kumbh Mele mein hum bichhad gaye the. And I don't know कौन से जन्म का बदला ले लिया आपने कि ये फोटो लगा दी. मैंने आपको इतनी अच्छी फोटोज भेजी थी. This is some sweet revenge that Ranjan ji is having, I think just because he's in charge of Young Indian, that is the reason why he's put my photo there. And this Young Indian is not related to the National Herald Rahul Gandhi Young Indian. In which case, forget about contempt, both of us will land in jail. There'll be a ED raid tomorrow, you never know. No, but thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and an honor. And to see so many luminaries here. And I reiterate, no question is off limits. I just hope no answer is off limits. That is my worry mostly at most times, that people get a bit perturbed by, how I answer. But to answer that first question, absolutely, Ranjanji, both my parents were scientists. My father worked at Harvard under Nobel laureate Robert Burns Woodward, and my mother worked under a Nobel laureate Sir Derek Barton at Imperial College. Both of them returned to India because they wanted to, those were the 60s, early 60s, and both of them wanted to make something of this country. And then there was a symposium in Delhi. My mother was joined Delhi University, and my father was a professor at IIT Kanpur that had started in that decade itself. And my father gave a talk in that symposium, and my mother asked a question, and my father couldn't answer. And that troubled him, so he went back to Kanpur, and he thought about that question for a week, and then he wrote a letter to my mother. And I still have that letter, and that whole letter is basically answering her question, saying, "Dear Miss Markan, my mother was a Punjabi and my father a South Indian, Iyer. And this is the answer to your question." And then in PS, he wrote, "I am an eligible bachelor. If you deem it desirable, perhaps we could get married." It's unbelievable. And my mother said yes. And my father took one Bharati, Professor George, in a train that was 7 hours late. And my grandmother, maternal one, saying, "Ye kis madrasi se haan keh diya, aayega nahi aayega, kya chal raha hai yahan pe?" And but he, of course, he landed up. And then that same night, she went with my father to IIT Kanpur. And they were there for 30 years.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah. But as you correctly said, the rules were different. Well, different is to put it very mildly, misogynistic. So, the wife could not get a job where the husband had a job. So, my mother could not be a professor. She was as gifted, if not more, than my father. But both of them worked together in the same lab. They sat across each other for 30 years, across the same table. And it was a campus life, and those of you who've been to Mao would realize what a beautiful life campus life is. And I, as a child, once you experience campus life, there is no other life that comes even close to it. And we would spend 15, 16 hours in the lab, including the Sundays, and the dinners would be in the lab. And it was a chemistry lab, so you need those TLC plates, thin layer chromatography plates, used to be prepared with silica. And then once you've prepared the wet plates, you need an oven to bake those plates. There used to be one oven in the lab, and my father would make pizzas for dinner. And God knows how much of silica toppings that I have consumed as a kid. So much for environment hazard and all those things, and so many fumes of chloroform and benzene, but it was great fun. And we had the NMR room, NMR instrument room, and that was the only place with the air conditioner. So whenever Kanpur could get really hot at times, 50 degrees, so we would actually sleep some nights there in the air-conditioned comfort of the NMR room, on the floor. It was great fun. So yeah, I wouldn't have wanted any other childhood.
So I have kept one question for the next time around about how he got married, but that we shall keep it for the next talk, that next time he comes to Indore with us. Now, biology and chemistry were among the subjects that were beyond my comprehension right from the school days. So pardon my ignorance in this field. Just to give you a background for those who don't know, his day job is as a research scientist in JNU. Yes, he is in JNU. As a full professor at the JNU. And again, while doing my research, we found out that you all have played a very significant role in the development of a vaccine for tuberculosis. Also, very recently, a pioneering discovery about the proteins preventing the malaria parasite invading the red blood cells. Could you please tell us a bit more about that? Because I think malaria and tuberculosis are something that are all pervading all around, and something to do to help us with this menace would really be helpful.
Right. So, at the risk of boring some of you, but I'll try to, kind of simplify it as much as I can for my own benefit as well. I have a lab in JNU. Please come and visit. I'll arrange visas for JNU. It's, multiple entry if you wish. बस एक नारा देना होगा आज़ादी आज़ादी and then so I have a small lab, and it's at a place called Special Center for Molecular Medicine. It's one of the newer centers or schools in JNU, a very tight-knit faculty. All of us are friends and collaborators now. So my collaborators are Professor Govardhan Das, who's a world-class immunologist, Professor Shailja Singh, who's a world-class parasitologist. And so it's really fantastic, and I have a dozen odd students in the lab. And we, 9 to 5 that's what I do. I like to be tucked away, and there are days when I, end up not talking to anyone, and I think that's a great refuge. It's great to collect one's thoughts, and as the sun goes down, then I like to switch off, because science can be very monotonous. The results can be very few and far between, and as I say, appearing on television and writing an article is one of the easier things to do. In science, sometimes it takes 4 to 5 years for you to end up writing a paper which is of 2 pages long, and which even you don't end up reading after a while, because it can be so anticlimactic. You're all excited about the best part of science is, by the way, there are no restrictions there are no time limits. So
no, not at all, sir.
No 30 seconds extra.
No, not 30 seconds.
Right, that's great. So the thing about science is that the best day is the day you get the idea. The next best day is when your student tries out that idea experimentally and it works. And then that's it. Then you submit, you collect all the data. It can take years. If it's collaboration, it takes even more time. Then you submit it in high spirits, and then the peer review, the referees come back with, demanding 12 or 15 extra experiments, and 6 months down the line, you resubmit it, and then it comes back again, and a little bit more, and after the year, they say, yes, all right, we'll publish it. And it's so anticlimactic, you're so tired at the end of it that you're just thankful that your paper got published, and you don't even look at it. So honestly, I've looked at my scientific papers through the the whole rigmarole of revision so much that I really haven't read them once they've been published, and I hope others have read them. But that's the beauty of science, and it's very rewarding to see it work. But to be very honest with you, I see myself as just one cog in this giant wheel. Very fortunate and lucky to be able to, bring to fruition some ideas that I think could work. Most of them don't work. That, of course, you don't publish the ideas that don't work. Although there is a journal of irreproducible results. And those who publish in that journal are given Ig Nobel prizes. I don't know whether you knew that or not, and it's absolutely wonderful. This thing called Ig Nobel prizes, and believe it or not, some of the people who've actually got these Ig Nobel prizes are top-notch scientists. 3 of them are in fact real Nobel laureates. Wow. Who've got Ig Nobel prizes. And this tells the quirky side of science, and that is why I never leave science, because to give you one example, Now, I forget the name of the scientist. He got the Ig Nobel Prize, and then he also got the Nobel Prize. So what he did was, his theory was that the ulcers, so for a long time, for decades, all the pharma companies said that ulcers are caused by stress. And so they started marketing, these anti-ulcer drugs, these proton pump inhibitors, and they were, at one point of time, they were the world's largest selling drugs because the Americans were, swallowing them by the truckloads. And here comes this Australian scientist, and he said, no, the ulcers are caused by a bacteria that resides in your stomach. And everyone, especially the pharma companies, just said, what an idiot this guy is. No living thing can survive in the stomach. The pH is of 1, it's like HCl. It's impossible. And he said, no, I'm right. This bacteria is called H. pylori, and this resides in your stomach, and it slowly eats away your stomach lining, and that is how you get ulcers. And the way to treat them is not through these proton pump inhibitors, which are world's largest selling drugs, but antibiotics. And his papers were rejected. The pharma companies blacklisted him, and he couldn't go and give talks anywhere and all those. So he was so frustrated that in desperation, he actually drank the bacteria. He drank H. pylori, and he got ulcers, and then he gave himself antibiotics, and he treated them. And for that, he got the Ig Nobel Prize. I mean, you have to be absolutely mad to be able to do that. And 10 years after he got the Ig Nobel Prize, he got the Nobel Prize for this.
Wow, lovely.
It's unbelievable. What a story. What a story. So, that is the beauty of science. The world may poo-poo you, and the world may think this is an absolutely, terrible idea, and who the hell thought of this? And suddenly, one fine day, you are, the toast of the world. So I'll never leave that vocation. And that's just, the rewards are so few and far between, but those rewards are so beautiful that it's a real pleasure to be doing it. To come back to what precisely I do, as in other things, I truly like to be the jack of all trades. So honestly, it's an honest confession. I'm not a master of any trade. I don't like to be called as an expert in anything because, to be very honest, nobody is an expert now. In today's day and age, you feel you are an expert, and some guy on Twitter says, hey man, you're wrong. And it turns out that you are wrong, and then you're not an expert anymore. So the thing is to be humble and to realize that everyone's learning. Everyone is learning. And that's the beauty of it. Every subject, there is something new to learn, in what I do in tuberculosis and malaria. So I dabble in a lot of stuff. I started off with polyketide synthases. Those are the giant enzymes that make antibiotics. And then I shifted to directed evolution to make small molecule and peptide libraries from where one could pick out drug-like entities that could target essential enzymes of pathogens. From there, it intrigued me, and I moved to Mycobacterium tuberculosis. One of the reasons was, my training is as a chemist, and then I moved to biology. Everyone makes mistakes. I miss again. Incidentally, at one of the parties, someone asked me, so what do you do? And this was like 20 years ago, and I said, so I'm a chemist. So he said, तो 12 बजे तक आपकी दुकान खुली रहती है? उसके बाद मैंने कहना बंद कर दिया. मैंने कहा, I'm a scientist. So this thing between chemists and druggists, it's a very thin line. And my father contracted tuberculosis, in fact, tuberculosis of the brain. And almost that's when I realized that every Indian family has someone, a close one, who's had contracted tuberculosis. This has been with us for millennia, for millions of years, in fact, and especially in India, everyone has some family member who's contracted tuberculosis. It's just when your immunity goes down, that is when the bug resides inside you, and then it comes out, sometimes viciously. as was the case, with my father. He had TB of the brain, and it was very difficult to diagnose it because, we didn't want, to take the, the material out and find out if it indeed is, the biopsy, to do the biopsy. And then, as scientists do, one of his friends, Professor Jaya Tyagi, she was at AIMS, and this is the mid-90s, she was grappling with how to diagnose tuberculosis. And she had just published a gene which is specific to Mycobacterium tuberculosis that is not there in any human or other animals. So she said, if you can give me your cerebrospinal fluid, I can do a PCR and find out. So now everyone knows about RT-PCR. I can do a PCR and find out if you have tuberculosis or not. So my parents were at Trivandrum at that point of time. So in a thermos flask, we extracted some CSF of my father. I took it by flight to AIMS. She did the PCR, and it turned out he had tuberculosis. And she published that paper, and with my father's name as a subject. And that was the first example of using the gene, of Professor Tyagi's gene as a diagnosis for tuberculosis. The only grouse my father had, that he was described in past tense in the paper. The patient was or had. He said, what the hell, I'm still alive, what are you talking about? So that is when I decided. I knew absolutely nothing about tuberculosis and how endemic it is in our country. And that was the time when the genome sequence of tuberculosis came out in 1998, I think. It has 4,000 genes, and it's just absolutely remarkable bacteria. I mean, we may think that we are, as the famous phrase goes, top of the world, but absolutely not, and that is one of the beauties of doing science, pursuing science, that it truly teaches you humility. To give you an example, 100 years ago, scientists or biologists love to draw this tree of life, they call it. That is, they kind of put every living organism on a sheet of paper, and they call it the tree of life. And if you look at the 1880s tree of life, so you have bacteria, you have fungi, you have viruses that were discovered then, or, and you have apes, and you have man who is sitting on top of the tree. So barely 100 years ago, we thought that we were, we were the greatest thing, the best, the most knowledgeable, the most powerful living organism. If you see the modern tree of life, it has 6,000 branches, and we are barely hanging on to one branch, And this is what science teaches you, humility. I mean, we really are a bunch of cells. We may think we are successful, but absolutely not.
I think COVID has taught us all.
COVID has absolutely taught us, absolutely. But even before COVID, even E. coli, which we normally use in the laboratory, I mean, the thing replicates in 20 minutes. And here we try our damn best to replicate, takes us so many years to find a partner. Mostly we end up unsuccessfully. Some of them we're very lucky, we're very successful. And the E. coli are doing it, every 20 minutes. So who is more successful? I ask you. And so, but you're absolutely right. COVID has taught us just who is on the top of the world. We are no one. And that is so humbling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the futility of chasing happiness or the fickleness of life itself, and nothing came more starkly than the second wave, the Delta wave, when so many of our near and dear ones, we simply just
So what's your
collapsed.
take on how did the government, what's your take on how the government in India handled COVID?
So this is, it's a tale of two halves, if I can, or game of two halves, as they say. I think the government handled the vaccination at the later stages brilliantly. I mean, to have delivered 2 billion doses is unbelievable. And, I mean, when it started, the leftists, I hope there aren't very many leftists here, but I'm used to it coming from JNU.
Well, if they are today, after
they
this
are,
show,
then,
after this show, many of them will walk to the right.
I don't know about that. So, they were saying, hey, India doesn't deserve Narendra Modi. We need the New Zealand Prime Minister. I forget her name now. She's Jacarand. Yeah. And it turned out, in a matter of a year, the Indian Prime Minister had overseen 2 billion doses being administered. And New Zealand, with a population of, I think, 7 or 8 million, still hadn't gone through the first round of vaccination. So God knows how many countries Narendra Modi needs to be the Prime Minister of, the other way around. So I think the beginning part is what, and I speak purely as a scientist, I have an objection to. And I think that that's very tragic, because we call ourselves, I think we are the world hub for vaccines, we are. And if that is the case, and that is the case, then let me give you an example of what the World Hub should have done. On 12th of January 2020, the genome sequence for the virus was made public. On 13th of Jan, not even 24 hours later, Moderna had applied for a patent and had actually inducted phase trials of their vaccine in less than 24 hours. That is what makes you a great world hub. If you're talking purely scientifically, and I always say, please do not mix politics and science, because then all you will end up with is political science. So when you talk of science, talk of it purely objectively, because then you have to be truthful. Otherwise, you can talk of politics. So we got and this is just the mRNA vaccine, which, truth be told, were not very convenient for India to administer, because the cold chain needed for that was -20, some said -80. We simply didn't have the infrastructure. So we needed something like Covishield and Covaxin. Now, in order for us to do that, we needed the culture. Now, America got the virus culture going, CDC in Atlanta, within 3 weeks of the virus coming to its shore. We got the culture going, NIV, in Pune, in 3 months. Why? I don't understand that. So the scientific advisor and it is not Modi's fault. I mean, he's not a scientist. He's a lot of stuff, he's a lot of things, but he needed his advisors to tell him that yes, we made a decision to not go for mRNA vaccines, but we made a decision to go for Covaxin. We made a decision to go for inactivating the virus. We need the virus culture. Let us get it going within a week. But we took about 4-5 months to get that whole thing going. And in the end, we didn't really need the vaccines for the first wave, but thousands died in the second wave. And millions were saved because of the vaccines in the second wave. And even at that point of time when the vaccines were available, we were vaccinating sometimes not even 1 million a day, 0.6 million, and I couldn't understand it with the infrastructure that we had. And after the Delta wave, subsided, we picked up to the tune of 20 to 25 million doses a day, which was absolutely fantastic, Had we started the administration of vaccines 3 months before the Delta wave struck, we could have saved a lot of lives. We did save a lot of lives, but the fact is we could not save a lot of lives. So,
going forward, what is it that you think we should be doing now to prepare ourselves for new pandemic or new attack that might just come through?
So this again, and this is something that we need to learn, because, and the example could not be starker. You see, all of us, and some of us, are old enough to remember the SARS-1 epidemic. I think 2003 it struck. That was before the age of social media, so of course there wasn't that much of knowledge about it, and people weren't discussing it at all. There weren't very many channels. There was only NDTV. And that too, you know now about the NDTV now. It was a different avatar of NDTV. But so there wasn't much for the public knowledge to be enhanced about SARS-1. But scientists started making the vaccine for SARS-1, because that's the first thing that a scientist does. Whenever a virus or a bacteria comes, the easiest thing to do to kind of prevent a disease is to make a vaccine, because as Voltaire said something, we've had 300 years of tremendous progress in science, but then it was Voltaire who said that the combined benefit of all the medicine is to aid humans till such time your body cures the disease. Such a beautiful thing he said. Ultimately, the cure comes from our cells, our immune system. So, and that's why I say, the discovery of vaccination, incidentally, yes, Jenner did discover the vaccine, but Indians should be credited with what is called voculation. I think I might not get the terminology wrong, that they realized that if you were to give the pathogen in very small doses, it would trigger a response in humans, so that when you actually got the pathogen in large doses, you would be able to fight it. That's an Indian discovery, tremendous discovery. The only difference is that Jenner took the inactivated or a different form of the organism. He didn't take the real organism. But of course, as we all know, that once you contract the disease, you are vaccinated. So that is also voculation, I think it's called, I forget. But so that is why vaccination is the first answer to any epidemic. And the scientists, they started writing grants, they started making or preparing or getting rolling out the vaccine for SARS-1. But what happened was that by the time they could get their experiments going and start the phase trials, SARS disappeared. Actually, it lasted only for 6 months. Yes. And what happened was that when a pandemic disappears, the mandarins in the government and the bureaucrats and the ministers say, "Arey bhai, ab kyun chahiye vaccine? Ab to disease hi nahi hai." So all the funding stopped. And I personally know a couple of my colleagues who actually got funding, first year grant for making the vaccine, and the grant just completely disappeared. Second and third year gone. Ab nahi hai. Kyun chahiye tumhe vaccine? So we didn't have the world, and this is not just India specific. Americans, nobody had a vaccine for SARS-1. Now that is the lesson that we should have learned, because 15 years later when SARS-2 struck, we realized that the spike protein is 70% identical between SARS-1 and SARS-2. That if we had a vaccine for SARS-1, we could have prevented a lot of deaths through SARS-2. So, this thing about being prepared doesn't just mean that you should be prepared for the pandemic that will strike you. Is that you should be prepared for the pandemic that you've just had and that has disappeared, but you better have the cure for it ready, because the next pandemic would be related to it. That is the lesson that hopefully we've learned. Now, of course, we have the vaccine, but we've seen, even in SARS-2, the vaccines that we made are now totally ineffective. And of course, they have to be, because SARS has mutated so quickly that the receptor binding domain or the spike protein is now totally different from what the original SARS virus is. So Covaxin and Covishield, and of course the mRNA vaccine, Pfizer, gets a lot of stick. Your vaccines are ineffective. Of course they are ineffective, because they were effective for the original strain. They're not anymore. So this is a constant process. You have to, the cure or the alleviation will come most possibly not from the vaccine that have to be quickly made for the virus that is currently the rage, but it will come from small molecules and drugs that will attack the housekeeping of the virus, the replication of the virus, because those enzymes the virus cannot change. So, we not only need the vaccines that we need to be prepared for, we need small molecule drugs as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
And just to give you an example of what I mean when I say I'm a jack of all trades, that as a scientist, I truly believed that it is our responsibility to contribute to the effort. So even though I knew absolutely nothing about COVID at all, I knew as much as any of you did when it struck us, in collaboration with Shailja, my colleague. We started on the COVID project. I said and her husband actually was brought out from the jaws of death during the Delta wave. And I suffered, and my family suffered Delta wave. Our colleague died in the Delta wave, professor at JNU. So we decided we'll try and tackle COVID. So our next publication that is coming is actually on COVID. I just want to say that.
Lovely.
To anyone who might believe that it's very daunting to enter a field, it's all in the mind. You just have to believe that you know absolutely nothing. And I jocularly say that Ashutosh is Jon Snow, but actually we all are. We know nothing. And if we go with that spirit, we'll end up learning a lot. So we've entered into this field of COVID, and now this new molecule that we have, it is more powerful than remdesivir that we've discovered. So hopefully something will lead to it, and one thing leads to another. But it's exciting, any new field. I know it's very macabre for a scientist to say this field is exciting, but for a scientist, purely from science perspective, there's so much to learn. That's very humbling and exciting at the same time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the continued research, and we count on you and your colleagues to help us through any such future pandemics and problems we might encounter. But now, moving on to slightly less serious topics. My friend Mr. Rahul Jain is sitting with us here, and whenever we message him for a program, we get a one word response, K. And despite his saving on time with typing the O, many times we still struggle to meet him. And here you are, the day job is of a research scientist, churning out these papers, then you're on Twitter all the time, then you're on Times Now, and then you write books, and then you come to shows like this. How do you do it?
No, to be honest, it's not a big deal. I really enjoy whatever I do, and I've learned this. You can say there's a bit of pedigree involved in this, because both my parents, they were hardcore organic chemists when they started off. And my father, was the student of Robert Burns Woodward, who was a synthetic organic chemist, and who could really synthesize. He synthesized vitamin B12, chlorophyll, strychnine, and he got the Nobel Prize in 1965. And my father went for the ceremony, and incidentally, when he got the Nobel Prize in the same year, 65, for physics they gave it. So Woodward got it for chemistry, and physics they gave it to Richard Feynman, the famous teacher, and of course, a tremendous thing on I think particle physics. And then a debate struck there: who was greater, Woodward or Feynman? And the students collected there, at the ceremony, and Feynman students said, of course, Feynman is greater, and Woodward said no. And both of them were of the same age, born in 17. They got the Nobel Prize in the same year, from the same university. They had done their initial degree, so it carried on until one of Woodward's students said, given ample time, Woodward can synthesize Feynman. So Woodward could synthesize anything, and vitamin B12 is one of the crowning achievements, erythromycin. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So that was the age where chemists were synthesizing these molecules without worrying about how expensive it would be to bring them out as drugs, terribly expensive. And now we've learned that hardly any drug that is in the market is actually chemically synthesized. We depend on bacteria to synthesize those molecules. So my father came from that background, and then slowly he changed to biology. So did my mother, bioorganic chemistry, and so on and so forth. So it's just a matter of entering into a domain with passion. And whatever you do, you do it without worrying about the rewards and the accolades or recognition that may come your way, is to enjoy it. And I think that's the pedigree that I've tried to imbibe. So if I write, whatever I do, and if I am on a public platform, I do it for fun. Everything I do is for fun. And to be honest, public speaking, I take it very seriously. It's a real privilege, and it's an honor, because not very many people get to speak publicly on matters, get to articulate on matters. And of course, social media has changed that a lot. But 20 years ago, I remember flinging books and newspapers, on the wall, saying, "Oh, I'm full of rage. What the hell is this Hindu op-ed about? And it's crazy. And I want to say something," but of course there were no platforms to say it. So now there is a platform to say it. I'm very privileged for that. And to be honest, it's astonishing, but in an hour-long debate, everyone gets about 2 minutes. And how quickly those 2 minutes can go. You can faff about things, and the anchor will say, "All right, your 2 minutes are over." Now anyone can do it. Many people do it. But that's not the objective. So every debate, and people, they have memes ki aaj, they say it for a lot of other people, but they started saying for me, "Aaj Duggal Sahab ye bane, aaj Duggal Sahab ye bane." I don't mind it, because any new thing I go into, I learn. If it's foreign policy, I clarify that there are experts on the panel, but here is my take as a layman's take. So I do it with great passion. I do it with a great sense of responsibility, that I am also learning along with others. I might not be right, but this is my take, and this is what I believe. I'm willing to be corrected, but in those 2 minutes, this is what must go in: 4 or 5 facts, a tinge of humor, a tinge of this and that, and some comebacks, and putting someone down playfully, and things of that sort. So yeah, so it's great fun. So I don't really look for time to do things. Nothing is compartmentalized. So it's not that. So yeah, the only thing that is compartmentalized is the science that I do, because that I have to, because I'm paid for it, and I'll be sacked from JNU if I don't work there 9 to 5. So that apart from that, everything else, it's not that I have to write for 2 hours today. And as Naipaul said, most of your writing is in your head. It is only after months that you put it out on paper, but you keep writing in your head. So that's the whole thing.
You talked about passion. I see 3 Internet Hall of Fame entries are, and I'm sure all of us here are aware of Shankar Mahadevan, Breathless, where he recites, and you actually pause the video because you want him to take a breath.
Yes.
And then I'm sure all of us have heard Kartik Aryan, Dimag Ka Dahi. And the third one, ladies and gentlemen, is Dr. Anand Ranganathan talking about Rahul Gandhi. And his eyes light up, as if Rahul Gandhi is, with no offense to Mr. Gandhi, he is there just to provide a lot of material to Mr. Ranganathan, Dr. Ranganathan, and provide winnability to Narendra Modi. So, could you tell the audience about, if you don't mind repeating, because many of them may have seen it, but some of us haven't. So could you just tell about the 1 minute clip that you have?
No, to be honest, I think BJP needs to really worry about it, because their star campaigner might go to jail for 2 years. 2024 was looking like a landslide, but now it's a very difficult thing. Somehow I think BJP lawyers, Mahesh Jethmalani and all, they have to really fight for Rahul Gandhi. It's not that easy. No, but and let me tell you, let you into a secret. I got a WhatsApp from Shankar Mahadevan about 6 months ago saying, bro, I got this forwarded thing of your thing and it's really fantastic and I really treasure that. I really treasure that. But of course, no, I mean, Rahul is an enigma and he's an absolute genius. What can I say? I mean, everything that he says is just not just meme material, it's just classic. And you really spoiled for choice. Which one is the favorite one? My favorite is him giving a talk or rally in Gujarat when he looks at these thousands of Gujarati women and he says, "Aap pe bahut sacrifices हैं, आपने कितना दूध दिया है इस देश को." So that's personally my favorite. So in that 1 minute clip, I kind of somehow, all that thing that comes out is just, this morning I woke up at night and politics is in your pant, in your shirt. I mean, all these things, it's almost like we've grown up with these things, Rahulisms is like Siddhuism. So it just came naturally. And the other thing, of course, Shankar Mahadevan is a legend. But sometimes what happens is, and I think increasingly, especially with a lot of Quranic verses, that I write down, mostly when I write down, what I want to say in a debate. Through that process of writing down, I get to, remember at least 60-70% of it. Sometimes when I have to, say things that requires a lot of facts that is very difficult, like for example, when I talked on MSP, the minimum support price, or is it the maximum? I can't remember, but there was this debate, about MSP, and so I had 10 reasons why this is like a completely, medieval, archaic Soviet Union that must be dispensed away with. So there I had 10 points, and so there I actually put in front of me, and then I was looking at it, and so, but while writing it down, I remember. So it's not rocket science. Just.
See, you've given me the liberty of calling you Anand, and I'll say
please.
This. You are getting younger. Or at least I am getting older, and I'm sure many of us have seen that ad, Seagram ad, "Men will be men," where the gentleman forgets his wife's name and has to resort to his friends helping him. And here you are on TV reciting absolutely the entire verse, right down to the chapter and the verse number of the Quran and the Hadiths. And believe you me, I mean, it really bugs the Mickey out of me, because here we can't remember 2 lines, and here, how do you do it?
There it is, my life is on the line, because if I make a slight, even a typo, this is, so I have to be exact. I mean, I can't, you can make a mistake, कि हाँ वो हमारे वेदों में ये कहा गया है. I can't do that. I have to be precise, what the Quran says. If the Quran says polytheists are the worst of creatures, then they are, If the Quran says culture much before, 30 years before, it actually is almost identical to that. So there is this guy who's actually shouting that, I'm crazy, but that is what this whole society has actually become. We've given, space to people it's just so bizarre, we can't even call it. I think we've reached a stage where we can't even be scared of it. People who said, I support Nupur, they have been beheaded. It's just so bizarre, and the state is ineffective. The state is a coward, and the problem is, and I've said it openly, that yes, I am a coward. I can't say a lot of things because I stay in this country. And the problem with bravery is that you can be brave, but your bravery, if it is not backed by the state, very quickly turns into bravado. And there's a difference between bravery and bravado. In bravado, you just say things without fearing any consequence. And so if you do that in this country, even if you support someone who did nothing wrong, I mean, it's tell me what she did wrong. I mean, is quoting religious scriptures wrong? She quoted them correctly. And forget about her. People who said, I support her, 3 of them were beheaded. So it's a very bizarre thing. But so I have to be, to cut a long story short, I cannot afford even a minor slip. So that's the reason why I quote verbatim.
No, but it's very laudable that I think you're one of the few public voices that stood up in support of Nupur Verma, and you are still very vocal about it. And the fact that her party, the government, and even the media, the voices, were unable to take a stand.
No, it's a real tragedy, and I think one of the things that has pinched a lot of rational people, and firstly, I think majority of the right, I mean, the pigeonholing itself is problematic, but they're logical and rational. The left, by definition, is illogical and irrational. That is why they still believe in communism. And I think it's beginning to pinch this kind of lack of any reaction from the higher ups in the BJP. It is very clear to me that the party threw her under the bus, and the only people who could actually save her from then on did worse, made sure that the bus ran over her twice, Supreme Court. And then, of course, society, I mean, it doesn't really matter once the government and the Supreme Court are against you. What can the society do? I mean, I truly am not one of those who believe that the change will come from bottom up. I think that stage is, that French Revolution stage is gone. Change has to come from top down. You've elected, representatives for that. There's no point saying that, look, we have to bring the change. I mean, you changed the government because you thought those people you're electing are going to change the things which they promised. Now, if they do this to one of their own, and for no fault of hers, the words were different, but she quoted actually verbatim. And one of the reasons why, it gave me power to say what I said was because I simply quoted the 2 hadiths. I quoted it. So nobody, I mean, of course I can be beheaded, that's all right, but honestly, if for quoting something verbatim you are beheaded, then, you deserve to be beheaded. Let me put it this way. You are living in a state that is allowing that. I'm an Indian. I'm not from New Zealand or something. I mean, I live and die in this country. So, I mean, I'm prepared to, I accept that, So, that's the whole situation. And now, what can be done about Nupur? I mean, you've seen, I don't want to quote what the Supreme Court said to her. They blamed, the beheading of Kanhaiya Lal, the tailor, on Nupur. It's crazy. It's so bizarre. No one acted on it. The government didn't criticize the Supreme Court, the judges. It was left to us. And we've seen what happens when I didn't even criticize the judiciary. And there is a criminal contempt of court on me. I stood for someone. That person has apologized. Milega to usko do lagaunga main ki yaar, I stood for you. You said sorry and buggered off, and now here I am holding the can. But he's a good friend, so it's all right. He might have had his reasons, but it's just bizarre, this country is. But it is our country, even if we don't change it, we have to suffer the status quo. We should be prepared for it.
Okay. You, taking on from this, you say you're a free speech absolutist. Absolutist, yes.
Absolutist, yes.
And quoting Voltaire or friends of Voltaire, that I may disagree with you, but till my dying day I will defend your right to say it. And then you have the famous Idi Amin quote, which I heard. Could you narrate that?
Sorry, did you say Didi Amin or Idi Amin?
No, Idi Amin. I hail from Calcutta, born and brought up. I have to go back at times.
So I won't deny there are similarities now. No, but so there are obvious caveats. I mean, when I say I'm a free speech absolutist, and I've explained this before, I mean, people believe that anything is kosher. No. I mean, there are 4 exceptions to that, and I've said this many times. The first one, and they're very obvious ones. One is you cannot divulge state secrets, I mean, in the name of free speech, unless you're a journalist belonging to, one of those organizations. So obviously that is not on. You can't, tell Pakistan that these are the army movements and this is what I've got. Obviously, that's a crime. The second is you cannot shout fire in a crowded theater like this, because then you're physically going to harm others. Now that cannot be free speech. The third is you cannot say what you want to say and lead a mob to violence. Obviously that's physical harm, so that's natural. And the fourth is defamation. So you cannot say in the name of free speech that, I don't mind people saying that Anand is corrupt. That's fine, because what is corruption? That of course is an abstract definition. Is it cash? Is it kind? Is it, everyone is corrupt. So you can say Anand is corrupt, but you can't say Anand took $6 million from Adani. That's problem. So that then I will sue you. So, in free speech, the defamation doesn't enter into that. So these are the 4 caveats. Other than that, I firmly believe that, a person should, and especially when it comes to matters of religion, matters where there is so much fakery and hate that is spread through religious scriptures that we do nothing about. I mean, just today I've tweeted before I came, and so there might be a second contempt of court case by the time this finishes, but अब एक आ गया तो it's like शोले का वो है, कुछ ज़्यादा तो नहीं बोल दिया partner, अब बोल ही दिया है तो अब तिहाड़ जाना है तो यार फिर साथ ही आ जाए ना 3-4 एक साथ. Let the sentences run consecutively. So yesterday, there's a very, I'm just banking on the media. I hope it's not wrong, because then everyone who read it would go to jail. But it reported something that really shocked me. So there was this hate speech case going on in the Supreme Court. A very good friend of mine, Vishnu Jain, is one of the lawyers so a Muslim put in this thing about hate speeches made against Muslims, but it was selective. And the Supreme Court was hearing it, and Vishnu said, but there are a lot of things that have been said against Hindus. Why don't you include that as well? The Solicitor General also agreed with that and said it. And the Solicitor General, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, he said it correctly, that the DMK chief at one point of time said all Brahmins should be exterminated. He said it vocally, and there are quotes of it. I have quoted verbatim what he said. A little bit different, but he wanted the Brahmins to be exterminated. He said, if you see a snake and a Brahmin, kill the Brahmin first. He said all these things openly, And when he said this to the bench, one of the judges laughed. And the Solicitor General was so shocked, he said, this is not a laughing matter. Now, you're talking of the extermination of Hindus, Hindu Brahmins, and a judge is laughing. That really disturbed me, And this whole thing, so what is hate speech? Why are you laughing and smiling at what somebody is clearly making a hate speech? And not only that, so yesterday I came out and I said, who is going to decide what is hate and what is not? Because in the name of religion, we've simply, kind of relinquished this judgment that we make on what is hate speech and not. And we seem to be allowing everything. And I took on live TV, I took an example. I hope Rahul Shivshankar is not regretting it. But I said tomorrow publicly, like a mic I have, and I quote the verse that polytheists, i.e. Hindus, are the worst of creatures. And if you don't believe in our verses, we will roast you in hell. And all the unbelievers have to be killed if they're not converted. Is this hate speech or is this not? There were 8 panelists sitting there. But my question is directed to the Supreme Court. Does the Supreme Court believe that this is hate speech? Now, if a man had said it, and the Supreme Court didn't know that this actually is verbatim verse, Of course, Supreme Court would have said, this is horrible hate speech, arrest this guy. But will the Supreme Court ban the Holy Scriptures? Does it have the power to do it? I don't know how many of you are aware, there was, Shri Sitaram Goel brought what is called the Calcutta Quran petition in the 80s. He said that there are some verses of Quran. He just said some. If you read the Quran, that's an understatement. He said those verses are hateful verses and they should be expunged, or at least the court should make a judgment as to what is to be done with those verses. The police was sent after him. The High Court said, how dare you bring this, the petition. The petition was thrown out, the government, there was a warrant for his arrest, and if I'm not mistaken, he was actually jailed. So, who is the coward here? Who is the one who's kind of, relinquished this position of being the arbiter of what is hate speech and what is not? So, clearly, this is a shameless hypocrisy. And if you're indulging in it, trying to be clever, then clever by half and saying, oh, look, we are going to decide what is hate and what is not, I mean, I'm sorry, that is bullshit. And I said it yesterday, and I've tweeted it today. So by the time this ends, Ranjan, I might be, thankfully we don't have, we are not sitting in Calcutta. But you never know. BJP governments are also supposed to, you never know what happens.
No, but hold
After
on.
all, somebody, just to end this, what is his name? He's a priest, Kali Charan. Very famous, he gave the Shiv Stotram, Tandav Stotram. And absolutely mesmeric. And he said something against Mahatma Gandhi. There was an FIR filed against him. By the way, I don't know how many of you know that the Supreme Court has said that it will not be tolerated any abusive comments against Mahatma Gandhi. This is our Supreme Court has said this. Bizarre. So, have they even read what Ambedkar called Mahatma Gandhi? I mean, he published a whole book. The title was in Mahatma Gandhi, Why We Don't Believe in Mahatma Gandhi. Yeah, no one has abused Mahatma Gandhi more than Ambedkar. He's called him charlatan, he's called him left, right and center, he's exposed him. I have written an article on that. But according to the Supreme Court, you cannot say anything against Mahatma Gandhi. So Kali Charan did, and there was a call for his arrest, and he was arrested from a BJP state, from Madhya Pradesh. So you never know.
So Anand, I mean, एक खून की सजा भी वही होगी, 10 खून की होगी. So let's go ahead with the infractions.
Yes, that's the spirit. जाएंगे तो जाएंगे.
जेल तो आप ही को जाना है. True well-wisher.
True politician.
So my daughter Anushka, she sees me consuming so much of the content with you, with Abhijit. She actually thinks I'm in a relationship with you guys because it is not...
So you the father-in-law of Virat Kohli?
No, this is my darling Anushka, my daughter. So she's actually sent a question for you on the judiciary. She says, you've said before, the only standing pillar of democracy today is the justice system. Beside the fact that words like bribery and corruption go hand in hand with it today, we also have cases from the 1940s still pending. On average, a Supreme Court case takes around 13 years to get resolved. How do you respond to our impatient generation who are disillusioned by the sheer time it takes to clear conflicts through the court systems? How do you see the judicial structure evolve?
No, it's absolutely true. This is a real surreal, I mean, there is no other way of saying it. And I have said it repeatedly, as I said, when one case comes, is slapped against you, थोड़ा डर निकल जाता है. और दूसरा तो अब मतलब अब actually अब डर नहीं लगता. अब ऐसा भी लगता आओ, like the Amrish Puri was feeding the pigeons. So I've said we have been a banana republic ever since we became a republic. It's a fact. The justice system is not just, the wheels are not just grinding slowly, they've come to a halt. No one is doing anything about it. 4 crore cases, 4.7 crore cases are pending. I have the whole data and I brought it out when the Chief Justice of India said, pendency is not a crime. He said something along those lines. I said, what the hell are you talking about? Pendency is not a crime. These many cases are pending. There are some cases that are 35-year-old. There are 150,000 rape cases that are years old. It's a joke. But it is also a fact that the judiciary has not really collapsed. If you look at the 4 pillars of our democracy, I would say, by and large, the whole building is collapsing. We are in zone 4, 7.5 Richter scale, ho chuka hai, the legislature, I would say, is completely corrupt. No doubt about it. The executive, 5% honest, 10% honest people, and all of them, I'm happy to say, are in this room. I don't want to be taken away, shackled from here. But the fact is, they are forced to listen to the legislature. So an honest IAS officer will be forced to listen to, and if you're not, then you're transferred. There have been cases where officers have been transferred 47, 48 times. And once Kejriwal said, the mark of an honest officer is how many times he's been transferred. Kejriwal has never been transferred when he was the IR officer. Apne pair pe kuladi maar di. But now we know. So the executive is collapsed, and it's collapsible, depending upon who the master is. The media has totally collapsed. There is no doubt about it. Judiciary is left. Now, there is, of course, a gradation of honesty. I would say, by and large, judiciary still is functioning with all its, lacunae, with all its problems. It is the only pillar that is heavily damaged, and tottering, but still it is functioning. We have to accept it. I think we need changes in that, and I really welcome a lot of criticism of the judiciary, increasingly so. At the same time, one must respect the judgment. I said it with this: if I go to jail, I respect the decision. I will gladly respect it, but one can disagree respectfully as well. And I think judiciary, you have to give them, but a lot needs to change. I think the people, the judges, they need to realize that with changing times, the government also needs to do a lot. It's not that the judiciary is going to be reformed solely by the judges. A lot of the infrastructure needs to be provided by the government. You need, I think I have the data not on my fingertips right now, but 35% of the judicial positions are lying vacant. High Court down, 35%. You have this collegium system, and it goes ping pong to and fro. It takes years for the government to okay a magistrate or a judge or something. Now clearly those things. My pet peeve in everything is to reduce everything to bare minimum functionality. Forget about all the embellishments and great thing. And when you reduce everything down to the bare minimum, keep it simple, Occam's razor, you realize that the best things run when they run as a corporation. Everything, the person who's running it must have a stake in it. The problem comes when people don't have a stake in what they're doing. Hence public sector units, hence 1,830 public sector units, most of them are sick, 400 of them non-functional. 21% of our annual budget allocation of 40 lakh crores goes in propping up these public sector units, intensely corrupt. For heaven's sake, we had a public sector unit that thankfully was closed down by the government 2 years ago, that for 3 decades was non-functional. It was called Hindustan Chlorofluorocarbons. Chlorofluorocarbons were banned in the 80s. Lekin abhi tak 2,000 crores every year was being given to this PSU. You know, you can't use chlorofluorocarbons because they destroy the ozone layer. For 30 years, no one's allowed to use it. But this PSU existed. Is that not corruption? Where is the people who have stake in it? Likewise, people must have a stake in judiciary. You know, in everything you must have a stake in it. If you have an education system, the education minister, how do we force the education minister to have a stake in his education ministry? To make sure that his children study in government schools. Tabhi improvement hogi.
ये वो भी है, and I think there are young parents here. A lot of history that is being taught in schools today is a narrative that has been built post-independence. It is actually not a real history. Would you like to tell them about the history, how it has been vitiated by a handful of people?
Yeah, I mean that's a very long story, and in a way it is. It's very.
So I'm just cutting you in because after this we move on to Mahakal and then Bollywood.
Okay.
So I think everyone is very keen on your Bollywood take. So sorry.
No, it's very easy for me because the realization or the epiphany was so stark because I came from a stream of science. So I was not exposed to these books, you know. I mean, till 10th, of course, we read history and we quickly forgot about it because, you know, we were focusing on science and STEM fields. And then only after I started reading later on in my life, when I delved into writing and, you know, public discourses, that is when I started reading non-scientific books. And that is when I realized, my God, what have we been reading? And some of the things were so painful. And then I realized that if it is painful to me, can you imagine somebody who's in that field? You know, how much more painful it would have been for, you know, him to see that, you know, it's not just that you are given a choice to read what is true and to read what is false. It is that you are denied a choice. You're not given you're denied it. You are forcibly being prescribed textbooks that tell you all lies. The starkest one that came, in fact, 2 years ago, I couldn't believe it. All my life, I was told that Ashoka, when he went into the Great War of Kalinga and he killed lakhs of people, and that's when he saw the devastation and he was so, my God, shocked by it, then he converted to Buddhism. This is what every one of us has been told, you know, in remorse. The fact I learned from, you know, Sanjeev Sanyal's book, The Churn, was that Ashoka was already a Buddhist 4 to 8 years before he undertook the Kalinga War. Why wasn't this told to us? I mean, I want to catch the guy who wrote that book, you know, and do things to him, all non-violent. But this is the reality. And I say, you know, nations weaken not because of their past, but rather by how they are taught it. And it is a fact. You may believe that if a person is taught wrong history, how will it weaken a nation? No, it's a realization. When you're taught wrong history, you make wrong people as your heroes. You eulogize them. And then your whole outlook changes. Your ideology changes. Yes. You know, and that is how you weaken the nation. I mean, if the people who are imbibing, who call themselves communists, they are the ones who've eulogized mass murderers. Yes. If only they were, you know, not taught that Che Guevara was a hero, or Mao was a hero, or, you know, Stalin was a hero. If they were taught the truth, or at least given a choice, they wouldn't have been eulogizing these people, mass murderers, as heroes. You know, their outlook would have changed. Their ideology would have changed. They wouldn't have taken our nation backwards. Yeah. They wouldn't have taken the same steps or demanded the same steps being taken by India as were taken by Mao in the Great Leap Forward. But they're doing now, you know. So we are weakened by what we are taught.
So they say now that if nations that don't remember the history or they forget the history are doomed to repeat it.
Yes, absolutely.
But just recently there was a Twitter war, and some of the left were saying that the Nalanda fire, the library,
Correct.
was done by the Jain
Couple
monks.
of Brahmin beggars, they said.
Yes,
yeah,
and
Hindu
not
beggars, yeah.
Bakhtiar Khilji.
Yeah.
And there is a Bakhtiarpur
Yeah.
railway station even today.
But you know, this is where I bring in what I call the a kind of a little bit variation on the Occam's razor. I have my Anderson razor, which is that you had Warren Anderson, of course, the genocidal monster who perpetrated the Bhopal genocide. And he ran away. But it's not his fault that he ran away. That is what criminals do. The fault is of the person who
Let him run.
who let him run away. So I don't actually, in a strange, macabre way you can call it, I actually don't fault Anderson. I fault Rajiv Gandhi. You know, he was ambassador, still the clipping of it, ambassador drove to the tarmac. Arjun Singh bid him goodbye. The fellow, walked on or climbed on to the chartered plane and he flew off. Whose fault is it? So, whose fault is it that we still have a town named after Bakhtiar? Is it Bakhtiar's fault? Is it a communist fault? No, it is the present government's fault. Whose fault is it that, we have, for example, Babar Lane still, a stone's throw away from the Prime Minister's residence? There is still, incidentally, in Aurangzeb Lane. Aurangzeb Road might have been renamed, but Aurangzeb Lane exists. So many other examples. You have the Prime Minister eulogizing St. Francis Xavier without realizing that he was the architect of the Goan Inquisition that murdered and killed thousands of Hindus and converted mass conversions and tortures along the lines of the Spanish Inquisition. You have him chadawing chadar on the person who said it is my great pride to demolish Hindu temples and to convert Hindus. So is it their fault? It's not their fault. It has to be the fault of someone who says, I take pride in not even changing one full stop and comma from the textbooks. So, the first solution in tackling a problem is to first pinpointing who is the source of the problem.
But सरकार हमारी है, system तो उनका है.
System उनका है.
So we now move to another favorite topic of yours, is that Hindus are 8th class citizens.
That's right.
So while we may not have time for 8, you recently visited Mahakal, and it's been done up very beautifully, still being done up, and you have a take on why we should get back control of our temples. Could you talk a bit more about
Yes, so this is another one of, so I said 8, and believe me, the common moniker goes that, we are or he is a second class citizen. That's the common, everyone uses that phrase. So once I used that phrase, Hindus are second class citizens. Then a week later, I came to know of something, and then I said they're third class citizens. A week after that, fourth class, fifth class. वो ऐसे चलता, the more I dug, the more I realized that, so now it stands at 8th class citizens. So maybe, I don't know, somebody will have another example and we will become 9th class citizens. But, I'm not talking of discrimination per se. Please understand that. Every person belonging, every Indian belonging to every caste, religion, sect is discriminated against or not. Muslims are discriminated against, Hindus are, Christians are. That's a separate thing. Discrimination is ideology, religion, caste, creed, strata, agnostic. I am talking of legally, constitutionally, Hindus are being discriminated against. That is my issue. Issue is not that Hindus are facing discrimination, because there are a lot of things where everyone else is. Here, constitutionally, through the acts of parliament, through legislations, through our cultural, societal upbringing, Hindus are being discriminated. That's the problem. And one of the discriminations, so the 8, and I have them on the tip of my tongue now. Really? So incidentally, I gave this talk, and it was very well received. I'm very thankful for that. And there have been calls for printing it out as a book, and I'm in the process of doing that. And I said my only condition is that my royalty should go to a Hindu cause, because ultimately Hindus are the plight of Hindus is responsible for me writing about this book. So at least, they should get something back. So that's in the pipeline, and a lot of people have asked me to deliver this talk at multiple places. And I think that's good, because now at least through me, people are getting to know that you may fool, as they say, some of the people some of the time. And you may fool some of the Hindus some of the time. But you can't fool all of the Hindus all of the time. And that is what has been happening. And those 8, the first one that I take is the control of Hindu temples. It's just remarkable. It's painful to the extreme that, Hindus, the states control Hindu temples. And it is not just the Congress, and I've gone through in detail. So incidentally, that talk that is now going to come out as a book has 180 citations. So everything is backed with references. Almost every, as I say, every historical or statement that you make should be hyperlinked. So you provide proof for it, because people want to know that, that is how you build trust. And, a lot of the facts that I came to know about Hindu temples have been through the activists that are not liked, frankly, even by the previous regime, and they are hated more by the present regime. T.R. Ramesh is one. There are cases against him. Jai Sai Deepak is one. There are so many other people who are working for, temples to be brought. I find it really fascinating. Why should Hindu temples be under the control of the state? And then you realize why. And then the next question is, why is this happening when we are under supposedly a Hindu Rashtra, Hindu government? Then you realize that it is never the governments, that change things. It is always the propensity of what lies behind that brings about a change. And that simply does not exist, because you can see it. You can see it in the pride that people take when the Kashi corridor was opened. Oh, Hindus ke liye itna kar rahi hai sarkar. When Mahakal corridor was opened, although beautiful, and I've been there, it's really fantastic. But the fact of the matter is, if the temples were under the control of the Hindus, a 2-month hundi collection of Tirupati would have made 50 such corridors. It's a fact. I have quoted statistics. 2-month hundi collection of one temple out of 110,000 temples, 110,000 Hindu temples are under the control of governments. One temple has 700 crores hundi collection in 2 months. Kashi corridor costed 350 crores. That's it. Mahakal corridor cost 300 crores. 2-month collection of a Hindu temple. Can you imagine the amount of money that the state has purloined, there is no other word for it, over the past 50, 60 years?
But even I was shocked when I heard you say this, because I thought that state control exists for churches and for mosques and for others, and you say that.
I mean, and there are petitions to remove state control that have been pending in the Supreme Court for 11 years, 12 years, since 2012. Dayanand Saraswati ji, he put that famous petition 2012 that Jai Sai Deepak has taken up, and other people have taken up. Saraswati ji died in 2015. Supreme Court is still not hearing that. If there was a petition that Saint Xavier's Church in Goa is under Hindu state control, Supreme Court would have heard it in midnight. Or Jama Masjid is under the control. And these temple boards, now Muslims and Christians are board members now. We had the case in Tirupati. Christian is under this thing. We had in Bengal, Mamata Banerjee, Farid, yes. What's going on? And I'll tell you, the tragedy is not just that the state charges audit charges in the name of, and forces 21 to 25%, 5%. Tirupati, it's more blatant. All these acts are there. The tragedy lies somewhere else, because the state has taken the right of the temples to charge rent for their temple land. And in Tamil Nadu, the rent that is being collected by the state for temple land is 1% of what the current going rate is. 1%. So that 99% money that Muslim mosques or churches, Christian churches, gurdwaras are spending for opening schools, educational institutions, orphanages. Hindus and Hindu temples are being prevented from doing that. How on earth is this natural justice? Somebody please tell me. How? Is temple a thing of the state? It's a private entity. Why the hell should the state control it, number one? Why the hell should the state dictate how much rent should be paid? There is so much corruption in Tamil Nadu especially, and so many other. T.R. Ramesh is fighting it, but BJP government has put more temples under state control than Congress did. So, and the Congress, actually there is 1954 Srirang Mutt judgment that actually was for removing a lot of draconian clauses, in some of the endowment acts, and the Supreme Court gave a judgment, and the Congress nearly overturned it, ignored some of the diktats of the Supreme Court, and brought in the 1958 or 1959 Act that still exists. BJP is merrily, following that act.
But when you go to the courts are very trigger happy to pass judgment against Hindu celebration of festivals, be it Diwali or Dahi Handi, and but why is it just one side? Why just on one side?
So, this is why I say that the change, a lot of people say, look, we are Hindus, wake up, Hindus, wake up. अरे भाई हिंदूज जागे थे तभी तो बीजेपी को लाए थे सोते हुए थोड़ा ना लाए थे. How, I mean, what do you mean 1 billion Hindus will march to the Supreme Court or to the Parliament? No, that is anarchy. The groundswell has a role to play, but don't ask the groundswell to act. The responsibilities of the people who the groundswell has elected. Anything else is anarchy, and that it is so shameful. Fourth criminal contempt bhi aa raha hai, aane do. Supreme Court in hearing the farm laws, he said, we hear all the people who are opposed to the farm laws. Where are the people who are for the farm laws? Why are they not here? Can you imagine such a childish statement being made by the Supreme Court? Later on it turned out that 82% of the farmers were actually for the farm bills. And we have 250 million odd farmers, the largest number of people in agriculture, labor force of any country in the world. 44% of our 515 million active labor force is involved in agriculture. In the West, it is 2 to 3%. It's totally unsustainable. But 82% of those 200 odd million farmers wanted those farm laws. Does the Supreme Court mean कि वो अपना agriculture छोड़ के केरला से, तेलंगाना से, आंध्र प्रदेश से, तमिलनाडु से, ओडिशा से सुप्रीम कोर्ट आए और तिलक मार के आगे 200 मिलियन लोग कलेक्ट हो और कहें कि हमें फार्म बिल्स चाहिए? What is this? This is democracy or this is the rule of the street? So when you have the Supreme Court saying this,
आप 30 फीट के ऊपर दही हांडी नहीं कर सकते.
30 फीट के ऊपर दही हांडी नहीं कर सकते और कह रहे हैं कि नहीं ये डेंजरस है. तो मुहर्रम डेंजरस नहीं है? Have you, I don't know how many of you have seen an active Muharram procession. It is blood curdling. In my next book, I have described it. And shivers run down your spine when you see, Kamazanis and all those, the terms that are used, they do it with pride. They hurt themselves. Many are killed. You have those cat o' nine tails. They are embedded with like steel claws. They must enter you. The blood must spurt. And there are women who take that blood and they smother their faces with it. Is that not human torture? Is that not human cruelty? वो अलाउ कर दिया, लेकिन 20 फीट से 21 फीट नहीं जाना चाहिए दही हांडी, because it is dangerous.
But why do we?
अब मैं एक और कंटेंशियस टॉपिक पे आऊंगा जो कि लोग कहेंगे अरे यार तुम फिर अब ये 5वां कंटेम्प्ट कोर्स लाओगे, तब वो मेल जेनिटल सर्कमसिशन. Is this not cruelty? I mean, you talk to, there's so many doctors here, but talk to any sensible person, a newborn. You are, using a surgical razor to chop off a part of his body. Are you telling me that that is not painful? I mean, which world do you belong to? Which doctor, leave alone doctor, anyone in the audience is prepared to say that is not painful? I mean, this is so bizarre. Why do we allow this? Do you know in Sweden, in many Nordic countries, it is not only banned, in some countries they say, again it's bizarre, but it is still acceptable that it is not just a parent's decision. It has to be the decision of the child. Now, obviously, a year-old child cannot say, yes, I don't mind being circumcised. The child has to grow to an age to, fair enough. And the way the justice deliverance is structured, a juvenile is not really paid heed to. So, by the time you turn 18, then you decide whether you want to be mutilated. There is no other word for it. We accept it. I challenge anybody to go to the Supreme Court and say, please remove this practice. I'll be jailed immediately. Is this not cowardice? What are we doing? How can we call ourselves sensible adults if we believe that a practice that is thrust upon 100 million or 50 million infants is not cruelty? Forget about Muharram, So the bizarre things are happening in this world. We no longer believe in common sense, and the justices are just a reflection of the cowardice that this society is under. What can you do? If I was the judge, I would immediately ban this. That's the first thing I would do.
Justices to theek hai sir, to samajh mein aa gaya why you have such love. But the other love that we found out, lust bole ya what is that tip tip barsa pani. So apparently that's the only time I've seen Ravina Tandon blush, because when she found out that when you were a young adult, you used to lust after her and tip tip barsa pani, and we all did. What a lovely song it is.
Very strong words you're using.
Lust for life.
My wife, this is a recording thing, my wife might be hearing this, but
but Bollywood is also kind of guilty of portraying the religion in one light, and now there's been a pushback, and obviously with the cancel culture and the boycott culture, it's kind of probably gone too far. We are now objecting to the color of bikini of Deepika Padukone, but
the Home Minister of this state.
I did not take the name, sir. I want to live here.
आप मुझे contempt तो दूर का, ये तो कह रहे हैं इसको अभी arrest करो.
So what?
With friends like you, I don't know who he is.
आप तो चले जाओगे सर, हमें तो यही रहना है. So what's your take on how Bollywood has kind of taken up, and going forward, do you think it will make a difference as to how religions are depicted, or as a society we are becoming far too getting pricked by small little things?
Yeah, so this is a great question, but first of all let me clarify that that's a great artistic, aesthetically pleasing song. Tip Tip Barsa Pani is beautiful. I mean the movement, the dance movements, the steps, the lyrics of the song, that is what
really.
But let me also say this, that now the younger generation has everything on his or her fingertips. We belong to a generation where I don't know how many, in fact, a lot of you would know morning shows. Many of you would have gone to morning shows as well. I mean, so please don't denigrate
Not at all, sir.
that part of, glorious
Not at all,
part of
sir.
our
Not
growing
at all.
up.
Not at all, sir.
Yes, in fact, I've written an article on this. And that article is titled on one of the morning shows that I saw, Reshma Ki Jawani. And those were brilliant days. And, we were lathi charged. There used to be so much crowd at 9 a.m. in the morning at some theaters,
Cinema hall here called
Cinema,
Starlit.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, great days. Of course, it was very difficult to, instant gratification was a bit difficult, but one left it to one's imagination, and so that is the reason why that song is very dear to me. But coming back to the general question, I think the pushback was inevitable. And I'll say it's a tragedy on two counts. Number one, Hindus have been so accepting of criticism, so accepting of mocking. It is ingrained in every one of us. I mean, you can burn any scripture you want. Ambedkar publicly burnt a Smriti. So many people do. Even a month ago, someone burnt and tore down Ramcharitmanas. So many things happen. You can't do the same thing for any other religion. That is what has started irking the Hindus. So it is not that the Hindus minded this criticism. And there's this wonderful handle called Gems of Bollywood. Starkly it brings out this kind of selectivity and in fact, one of the clips I saw where the hero is stomping or kicking the sashi of a van. And the sashi has painted Om on it. So his foot is actually stomped on the Om. Clearly it has been done with a malicious purpose, clearly. And clearly you would not do it for a symbol of any other religion. I mean, forget about sir tan se juda, matlab sir ka bhi pata nahi chalega, tan ka bhi kuch, saaton pushtaen aapki chali jayengi. So they do it for, and that movie is 10 years old. That movie came, people saw it, people ignored it, took it in their stride and went. But now the guy whose leg it was, the actor,
Shreyas Talpade,
he publicly apologized for it. He said, I'm sorry. He must have felt, my God, yeah. I mean, I don't mind doing it, even though it's, why the hell did the director ask me to do it? But there was no uproar. The Hindus did not kill me for it. But shit, this is wrong. I mean, this kind of selectivity. So I say it again. As a free speech, and I've said it publicly, I don't mind. You can say anything to Hindus. Hindus have traditionally never minded from Natya Shastra itself. Criticism, lampooning, mocking is actually part of our culture. But the people who are doing it, I think it is incumbent upon them to say that we are shit scared of doing it for any other religion. Yes, we are hypocrites. Please allow us to do it for Hinduism. ये थोड़ा सा उनको small print में डाल देना अगर तो Hindus कभी mind नहीं करेंगे, honestly. And I think it is high time because you see what happens is, and here I bring out Rahul Roshan, and he's absolutely right. If you keep on denigrating Hinduism like this, keep on lampooning what Gems of Bollywood says, and of course cinema is the medium that the most impressionable age goes and imbibes all those values in. If you keep on lampooning the tenets of Hinduism, mocking the priests, making fun of them, the rituals, burning them, stomping on the symbols, people will actually start hating Hinduism only. And that is what is happening. And, they will leave the fold of Hinduism thinking that the other folds are much better. Only when they, arrive at those shores do they realize, bloody hell, there is no going back. In fact, and I say this with pride because we are all civilizationally Hindus. I might be a Darwinian atheist, but yes, civilizationally I'm Hindu. One of the reasons why I went to Mahakal, and I say proudly so. In fact, in CERN, the physics laboratory in Switzerland, there is a statue of Nataraja. And when I tweeted about my going to Mahakal, I tweeted what is written on the plaque there. that I created the universe and I brought it into a dance form, and finally I will destroy it. That is what Shiva is saying. That is from CERN. So it's not what I say, it is what CERN has said. The issue is what exactly what Rahul says, that slowly what happens is that people will start leaving the fold of Hinduism. Now even that, you look at what I went to Nagpur. I went to the place where Ambedkar left the folds of Hinduism. That sthal, there were about 25,000 people milling about. It was like a mela. Most of them were Hindus. So the price of apostasy, that is leaving your religion, for Ambedkar is veneration by the people who are still in that fold, is Bharat Ratna. The price of apostasy in Islam is death sentence. You are to be authoritatively told, you shall be killed if you leave the fold of, if you are an apostate, the punishment is death. If you are an apostate in Hinduism, not punishment, the reaction is veneration, reaction is Bharat Ratna. Where do you find such glorious way of life? Where, atheism is part of your Charvak philosophy. Lingayats, they don't believe in the Vedas gloriously, they're part of Hindus. So, we've always loved this. And it is a tragedy if we become Abrahamic. But in order for us not to, the people who are denigrating Hinduism, they should be welcome to do it. Everyone's done it. But they should come out and say, look guys, we are shit scared of doing it for other religions. We are hypocrites. Please let us do this. Then it's fine. Do it.
I think I open the floor to the questions.
Dr. Anand, on this point itself,
Sure.
Hindu Rashtra and secular India, do you think they have two opposite poles?
See, secular, according to me, there is only one definition of secular. I mean, you can't have changing definitions of a law. If the word means something, then that is the definition. You can't change the definition of a word. You can invent another word, and it has been invented. For example, pluralism. That's another word. It carries another definition. I believe we are plural. Secularism means total separation of church and state, i.e. religion and state. You cannot bring religion into the matters of the state. But the opposite is also true. You cannot bring state in the matters of religion. We are actually not secular. And there are half a dozen examples of that. The biggest one is that the state is controlling Hindu temples. How the hell are we secular? और ये लोगों को समझ में नहीं आता जब लोग कहते हैं कि योगी आदित्यनाथ जी अभी रामनवमी पे स्टेट दे रहे हैं एंड ये कॉरिडोर क्यों बन गया 300 करोड़ का कॉरिडोर. अरे मैं कह रहा हूँ 7 लाख करोड़ आपने हिंदुओं से चुराए हैं और 2-3 करोड़ फेंक रहे हैं उनकी तरफ और कह रहे हैं कि हम सेकुलर नहीं है. सेकुलर नहीं है, पहले वो वापस करो 7 लाख करोड़, फिर हम हिंदूज विल ग्लैडली गिव यू दिस, बट यू रिटर्न दैट मनी. You return that control of temple land, you return control of temples. So we are not secular. I would wish for a secular state. I believe religion is separate. I believe the workings of the state are separate. They must not mingle. But it is also a fact that this country is plural because we are a Hindu Rashtra, Hindu thinking Rashtra. We are not, and I've said this, हिंदुओं की हिंदू राष्ट्र में ऐसी स्थिति है तो मतलब इससे गंदा हिंदू राष्ट्र तो हो ही नहीं सकता. कभी किसी मुस्लिम को देखा है मुस्लिम स्थिति में, मुस्लिम राष्ट्र में 8th class citizen, so in fact they are in Saudi Arabia the Muslims are 1st class citizens, all the others are constitutionally discriminated against. No one seems to mind it. The Muslims are not vying there कि हाँ भाई हमें मुस्लिम राष्ट्र नहीं चाहिए. यहाँ पे हिंदू राष्ट्र में हिंदूज 8th class citizens हैं और so many examples हैं. मतलब आप you can settle 5,500 Rohingya refugees in Jammu and Kashmir, but you can't settle 7 lakh Kashmiri Hindus in this thing. ये कैसा हिंदू राष्ट्र हुआ जहाँ पे 30 साल से आपके हिंदूज 7 lakh Hindus are refugees in their own country. You give me the example of any big economy, and I've counted till the 15 largest economies. In no such case are people refugees in their own country. It is unheard of. Will Americans be refugees in America? Are Germans refugees in Germany? ये क्या हो रहा है? It's so bizarre. मतलब मेरी समझ में नहीं आ रहा कि आप कांग्रेस को ब्लेम कर सकते थे. आपने ये जो 30 साल में है, इसमें 15 साल की तो बीजेपी की सरकारें हैं. तो आप वही है ना, मतलब आप पॉलिटिक्स, इट्स कंप्लीटली डिफरेंट केटल ऑफ फिश. मतलब जाएंगे तो कहाँ तक आप खो देंगे उसमें. बट द फैक्ट रिमेन्स, ये कैसा हिंदू राष्ट्र है जहाँ पे हिंदूज आर रेफ्यूजीज इन हिंदुस्तान, इन हिंदू राष्ट्र. आई मीन दिस इज सो बिजार. इट्स अ डिसग्रेस टू कॉल इट हिंदू राष्ट्र. ये कैसा हिंदू राष्ट्र है जहाँ पे यू हैव प्लेसेस ऑफ वर्शिप एक्ट दैट फॉरबिड्स Hindus, forget about taking control of their demolished temples, you can't approach the justice system to legally ask for control of your demolished temples. You have been prohibited by your parliament, by the Supreme Court that ratified Places of Worship Act in its Ayodhya judgment. कहा कि नहीं, ये तो glorious चीज़ है, it is हमारी धरोहर है. I mean, which other country, इसको आप हिंदू राष्ट्र कहोगे? कि there are authoritatively 1832 Hindu temples catalogued by Shri Sitaram Goel in Hindu temples and what happened to them in volume 1 and 2 that have been demolished and mosques built on top of them. Some say, like J. Sai Deepak and Vikram Sampath, that the figure is close to 40,000, 44,000. Which is very likely to be true. Hindus cannot forget about taking control of those 40,000 temples. Hindus cannot approach a court to put a case कि my lord, please आप इस पे decide करेंगे कि ये temple मुझे वापस मिले, मैं यहाँ पे प्रार्थना कर पाऊँ कि ना. यही prohibited है. ये कैसा justice है? कोई मुझे समझाए ये ऐसा कैसा हिंदू राष्ट्र है? मैं किसी कम्युनिस्ट से पूछना चाहता हूँ कि भैया तुम हिंदू राष्ट्र चिल्लाते रहते हो, कभी सुना है किसी मुस्लिम राष्ट्र में ऐसा होगा कि कोई मुस्लिम, इफ अ मॉस्क हैज बीन डिस्ट्रॉयड, पहली बात तो ऐसा मतलब हो ही नहीं सकता मुस्लिम राष्ट्र में. अगर है बाय अ हिंदू किंग, अ मुस्लिम विल बी प्रिवेंटेड फ्रॉम गोइंग टू द जुडिशरी आस्किंग फॉर दैट मॉस्क टू बी ब्रॉट बैक. और I am at pains to say this, that this is not a Hindu, Muslim or religious issue. This is a civilizational Indian issue. As an Indian, it pains me that a fellow Indian can tomorrow, and I've said this, if a Muslim wants or detects a mosque that was destroyed and a Hindu temple built over it, I will stand with that Muslim man or a woman to go to and demand justice. Why wouldn't I? Every Hindu would. But Muslims don't want Hindus to legitimately ask for that right. And Hindus don't want it. And I've said this, everything that I say, by the way, is publicly. Tabhi people hate me publicly and do whatever, publicly. The RSS chief, Dr. Mohan Bhagwat, said, don't look for shivling in every mosque. Why the hell not? Tomorrow I want to search every mosque. If there are 100,000 shivling discovered, it is my right to demand justice. मैं तोड़ थोड़ी ना रहा हूँ illegally. I am demanding justice from the court. And anyway, all those people who deride Hindus taking back the Babri Masjid, they are the ones who celebrate when illegally all the statues of the racist people, bigoted people, Western, kings, King Leopold, are demolished illegally because they say historical injustice is being corrected. पर यहाँ पे historical injustice को correct नहीं करना, बाहर करना है कि कॉन्गो में किंग लियोपोल्ड ने किया था, उसके स्टैचू गिराओ. सिसिल रोडीशा जिसने बनाया उसका ऑक्सफोर्ड से स्टैचू हटाओ, चर्चिल का स्टैचू हटाओ, पब्लिकली हटाओ, illegally, no sanction for it, because we are correcting historical injustice. लेकिन यहाँ पे आप लीगली करेक्ट करना चाहते हैं, वो भी आप प्रिवेंट कर रहे हैं, तो ये कैसा हिंदू राष्ट्र है भाई? मैं इस हिंदू राष्ट्र में नहीं रहना चाहता. आई डिमांड अ मुस्लिम राष्ट्र.
So one question.
Please.
This is regarding halal certification, which is now compulsory for.
Yes.
Please say something on this.
Yes, so I mean, in fact, this is one of the things that I've said in those 8 reasons. One of the things is the cowardice of the judiciary, 5th contempt court case coming against me, that they have banned Kullu Dashera, which was a 600-year-old ritual in Himachal Pradesh. They've banned Jallikattu on the pretext of animal cruelty. They've banned Kambala, I think, in this thing. And they've banned ritual sacrifice, animal sacrifice in Tripura. There was a big judgment. But halal, they have not banned. Now, is there anyone sensible with any semblance of adulthood and not arrested adolescents who can claim that halal, the ritual of halal, is actually not cruel? I don't want to describe this because आप सब लोगों को dinner करना है, मतलब you won't be able to have dinner if I describe, because I have described it. It is a completely religious ritual from start to end. It has to be performed only by a Muslim. You have to say Bismillah Rahman Rahim. The head of the animal being sacrificed has to face the Kaaba. It is complete ritual. It is so cruel, the whole act, that in some Nordic countries it is mandated that you have to stun the animal before you perform halal. यहाँ पे सब चल रहा है. यहाँ पे वो एनिमल क्रूल्टी नहीं है. किसी जज में दम है कि बैन कर दे हलाल? ये हिंदू राष्ट्र है. मतलब शर्म आ रही है मुझे, तो मैं क्या बताऊं इस पे? I don't know, you know. But that's the thing. We don't have the power, and I am sick to death of saying all these things. Being impotent. We are impotent because, potency comes to the masses in a democracy, through electing their representatives. We will always remain impotent. Please be under no misconception that tomorrow I can go to the Houses of Parliament and dictate, command, this is going to happen. I'll be thrown out and jailed. I'll be thrown out and jailed anyway. But that's the fact. Our potency comes from electing now, if our representatives don't act, what is the recourse? I'm sorry, I will not be an anarchist. I will never ask people to come onto the streets. That is not what adults do. That must never be done. That is what happens in dictatorships, or flawed dictatorships. Or people who are proud to be anarchists, or in leftists, this thing. But you are absolutely right, sir. It is the most cruel religious ritual practice. But it goes on.
देखिए ये सुन के I think a lot of us may feel that you have a deep love for Narendra Modi, the way you take after Arvind Kejriwal and Rahul Modi. But of late you've started criticizing our dear Prime Minister also.
No, actually I have been criticizing him for years. वो शायद अभी ज़्यादा पता चल रहा है, लेकिन सबसे ज़्यादा मैंने उनको क्रिटिसाइज़ किया था during demonetization. When I wrote 20,000 words on it, I wrote 5 authoritative articles, and I don't want to gloat, but I have been proven correct on every assessment as far as demonetization is concerned. I even wrote articles with titled Narendra Damodar Das Modi a failure. And I say, and people come back to me whenever they see me, "Arey ye dekho, ye to Congress hi nikla ye." मैंने कहा नहीं, whatever I've said, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm proud of every word I have written there. Every word, because I don't want to go back on my word. Whatever I say, I am my own devil's advocate before I put my points in public. I don't wait for others, and that's a secret I'm letting you in. Whatever points of view I profess, I have already thought of the counterpoints myself. Because I don't want others to say, कि अच्छा ये तो तूने सोचा ही नहीं था. Then I say, oh my God, I am so sorry. And if I don't say sorry, then I'll be a hypocrite. And so खुद सोच लो counterpoints पहले, devil's advocate, then you do advocacy. So I have been critical of everyone. It is just that a realization has come. That is what cushions my overtly overt criticism of Narendra Modi because I realize what he has planned all through, which all of us don't realize, and this is important saying this. You look at the audience here. You look at the social economic strata of people here. I'm sorry, Modi is not working for us. This realization came to me 5 or 6 years down the line. Modi is working for the people who don't give a shit about all what I have talked about in the last 2 hours. They don't give a damn about Hindu temples, about corridors, about they worry about toilets, they worry about Ayushman Bharat, they worry about running water, they worry about electricity, they worry about roads, which is what Modi is delivering to them. They worry about gas cylinders. This is why I am cushioning my over-the-top criticism because I realize उन्होंने ये सोचा है कि यार देखो ये सब चीज़ें जो हैं ये 10-15 साल बाद तुम सोचना जो फूक फूक के अपना खाना बना रहा है जो साइंटिफिक डेटा ये बताता है कि 19% of the deaths due to pollution were because of household pollution because women did not have gas cylinders. If Modi is changing that, Modi is not giving Hindus control of their temples, or Modi is not worried about Kashmiri Hindu refugees or places of worship act. Modi is saying, पहले जी लें आदमी, पहले पानी पी ले वो, पहले बल्ब आ जाए. अब पिछले 3 घंटे में एक भी हम में से एक आदमी ने ये सोचा है. The truth, ladies and gentlemen, is that we don't need this government. We've never, maybe 40 years ago, we needed the government. Right now, we don't need the Congress, we don't need the BJP. We are self-sufficient. All we want is a small private space जिसमें government कम से कम intrude करे. When was the last time we, took a government service? We are talking of our parents and our generation, phone line के लिए line, scooter के लिए line. All that is gone. When was tell me, passport सेवा भी आप हफ्ते में passport मिल जाता है. So we don't need the government. Modi realizes this. Modi is saying, sorry, Times Now से phone आ रहा है बार-बार. I've told them आज मैं नहीं आ पाऊँगा. But so this is why, when you say I have always been critical of him. And believe me, that doesn't mean that I absolve him of not working about, because governments run in parallel. मतलब ऐसा ये series नहीं है कि पहले मोदी वो सुधार ले, तो ये criticism रहेगा. But I have come to realize this. So मेरी अपेक्षा नहीं है उनसे. I am happy that the schemes that he has, piloted, pioneered many of them, it is sensational. If you look at the success of Ujjwala, मैं सिर्फ साइंस की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं यहाँ पे. I don't go by, as I say, politics और साइंस को मिक्स मत करो. नेचर एनर्जी पे उज्ज्वला के, which is a high impact factor journal from the nature, पढ़िए उज्ज्वला ने क्या किया है. लोगों की जिंदगियां बचाई हैं. हम में से किसी हिंदूज के टेम्पल कंट्रोल में नहीं आ रहा, या प्लेस ऑफ वर्शिप एक्ट, हमारी लाइफ पे कुछ फर्क पड़ रहा है? 40 साल से नहीं था, 50 साल से हिंदूज प्लेस ऑफ वर्शिप एक्ट का जितना भी 30 साल से नहीं था. वक्फ एक्ट इज वन ऑफ द रीजन. वी डोंट केयर, इट डजंट अफेक्ट अस. But you give a cylinder to a woman whose child will die as an infant, proven through household pollution. पहले मैं ये कर लूँ. So, so I have realized, it took me a long time. मैं भी पहले I used to get very perturbed. कि why isn't he doing this, yeah? So he says, and you look at another paper that has come, you build one toilet, it saves a family 52,000 rupees in healthcare costs. One toilet. Is this, this is an incredible transformation. Incredible. You look at Ayushman Bharat, which people were deriding कि तो Obama care की तरह होगा. Crores of people have benefited through that. Crores upon crores. Bank accounts, direct transfer. So Modi has realized कि यार देखो तुम्हारी problems अलग हैं. You don't need a toilet. God forbid if any of us were to demand, a toilet from Modi or a gas cylinder, So he knows this. He says, आपको वोट करना है, आप अपनी कॉन्शियंस से वोट करिए, लेकिन मेरे पास जो 99% वोट आएंगे वो उन लोगों के आएंगे जिन्होंने लाइफ में पहली बार बल्ब देखा है, सिलेंडर देखा है, टॉयलेट देखा है. सो दिस इज द डिस्टिंक्शन. या नहीं नहीं. नहीं, I personally I don't know of any organ. They I don't know of any, but it may be that some of those organs have been used in Rahul Gandhi, but that's another matter. लगता है ऐसे कि थोड़ी लिमिटेड सक्सेस हुई है, लैब में बने हुए ऑर्गन्स वहाँ डाल दिए तो कुछ काम चल रहा है, बट सर्किटरी में अभी भी प्रॉब्लम है. But I personally don't know of any. But there have been cases. I mean, artificial meat is one thing. You routinely hear about. Science is going to change incredibly through a lot of new techniques. For example, the gene drive through CRISPR-Cas will eradicate a lot of diseases. But आप ये भी सोचिए कि अब नाउ ये जो अभी इकोनॉमिक सर्वे आता है ना, हर साल आता है इकोनॉमिक सर्वे, उसमें बहुत ही कमाल का पाई चार्ट था. इनफैक्ट देयर वर 2 पाई चार्ट्स that showed the status of Indians' health in the last 30 years. तो एक पाई चार्ट था जिसमें 70% जो डिजीजेस 30 साल पहले इंडियंस को होती थी वो कम्युनिकेबल डिजीजेस होती थी. 70% टीबी हुआ, मलेरिया हुआ, ये सब. अब 70% नॉन कम्युनिकेबल डिजीजेस होती हैं. As we get richer, as we have more money to spend, as we become more lazy, more prosperous, we are leaving behind communicable diseases that will be cured by science. We have to start worrying about the non-communicable diseases. तो उसमें बहुत सारी चीज़ें ऐसी आएंगी जिसमें साइंस का रोल बहुत ज़्यादा है. And I don't know whether we'll be able to cure non-communicable diseases with the speed with which we will be able to cure communicable diseases.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know there are a lot of questions, but we are running slightly ahead of time.
Ahead of time?
Sorry, slightly delayed. So what I would request is, while a lot of us have our questions, Dr. Anand will be with us for some more time, and he'll be available for questions during discussions. All I would say that, Dr. Ranganathan, we've had under Melange Dr. Ramcharan, Mr. Irani, and other luminaries. This by far is the most riveting, thought-provoking, entertaining
Thank you very much.
discussion.
Very kind. Very grateful.
All I can say is this is part 1, because I have just been able to reach till here in my questions. So thank you for
Thank you
enlightening
so
us.
Thank you.
And thank you for carrying on a crusade.
No.
A lot of us wish to, but we're not as articulate as you. We love your Twitter feeds. And thank you once again for gracing with us this evening.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much. Very kind.
Thank you.